Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. We have just completed a public hearing on two new bylaws that are pending second reading. One is on special events and the other one is on temporary vending. And we'll ask the clerk if she will give us a summary of the activities that happened just prior to this meeting.
Certainly, Your Worship. A public hearing was held on August 6th, 2020 to receive written and verbal comments from the public on the draft temporary vending bylaw and the draft special events bylaw that were given first reading on July 14th, 2020. 29 submissions were received from the public and forwarded to council in advance of the public hearing, and one submission was received from the public at the public hearing. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, as you know, council has been working with the community over the last year on these two bylaws. I think that the consultation process has been significant. At this point, I think council's probably, ready to address some of the key issues. Given the fact that we've heard from 29 respondents recently, including 7 from members of the community, I'd move that we would address the second reading of these two bylaws in the first meeting in September, being the meeting on September 8th. And I'd put that forth for consideration.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please, Councillor O'Neill.
It grieves me to flag this at this juncture. However, in reading section 4.3 of the draft temporary vending bylaw, I notice in section 4.3(2), it reads, quote, occupy a vending, sorry, pardon me, I'll back up. No person shall vend in the town except in accordance with the terms and conditions of a vending permit and or the terms and conditions of this bylaw. No person shall, or with or without a vending permit shall occupy a vending location before 9:30 a.m. or after 9:30 a.m. And that should read p.m.
PM.
Well, thank you. That's the kind of non-substantive clarification we can make between now and if this motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment? Councillor Feeney's motion moved and seconded.
May I ask one more
To
question?
defer this, you get Colleen.
Thank you. While we're making non-substantive changes, I just wanted to flag that I had earlier in the day forwarded a couple of typographical errors, which I understand the clerk has addressed. They really are very missing letters. I did want to ask a question about the definition of mobile canteens, in particular in section 4. 4A, section 5, mobile canteens must be able to demonstrate that their vehicle is able to be moved. And I understand that to mean if there was an emergency, for example, and let's say where there was a mobile canteen and emergency services needed that particular mobile canteen to be removed rapidly, that is one of the reasons for the requirement. Can I get that as a clarification? So it means moved from the site, not simply moved.
Mayor,
Councillor Carver.
I'm just wondering if the discussion that Councillor O'Neill is
should be in the next meeting.
Bringing to the table could be done. I think it's an important point to clarify some of the terms, but does it belong in the middle of a motion that isn't related to those topics?
And I think the CAO alluded to the fact that if these issues that are being identified are relatively minor and don't change the intent of the bylaw, then it's the kind of thing that can be picked up between now and the meeting in September by way of bulk changes of relatively minor issues, I should think. Councillor Bain has got his hand up.
The impression I have, the motion has been seconded. I think questions can be asked. That wasn't of a request for a change. It was a request for information. So I suggest if there's
Good
a
point.
logical answer for that being in the bylaw, it should be addressed now. And the benefit should be, because we do have a public audience, and obviously
Okay.
it was asked by a counselor and it should be answered.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to respond to both the original point and then the point about discussion on the deferral motion. So I think that it is, the clarification in there with respect to being able to move the vehicle is absolutely intended for that type of scenario. Obviously, public and private properties are subject to this bylaw. That being said, it is also, because we are issuing permits of a substantial duration, it is also necessary to comply with other bylaws of the town, including bylaws which do, prohibit a vehicle to sit in a location for a prolonged period of time. So yeah, those are some of the conditions we're speculating. As to the question about the deferral, I think that for process, when a second reading like this would be deferred, when it comes back up on the agenda, subject to this motion on September 8th, yeah, we have a package for that meeting. It's a regular meeting. And so non-substantive amendments being presented as a revised policy can be detailed in that package to ensure that the public have a chance to review and reach the conclusion that those in fact are non-substantive.
Mhm.
So just get them to us by a minimum of 5 business days prior to the
okay.
September 8th meeting.
Deputy Mayor?
That's my question. I think if one of us has an issue, let the staff know and it can be addressed before we come, and then we'll see what changes are. But
Okay.
Mr. Hyde has already.
Councillor O'Neill?
I just wanted to thank the deputy mayor for that. It was my intention just to ensure that these were non-substantive. I assumed they were as I was raising them. And I look forward to our next discussions should this motion pass.
Okay, Councillor Carver?
Yes, amongst the submissions, there was one from the chair of the Chamber of Commerce. And there were several suggestions in that letter. And I just wanted to, I anticipated that we would have an opportunity to look at those suggestions. And would we have some direction from staff about whether those are substantive or non-substantive changes that have been suggested?
Yeah, so I think that, if this is deferred, after this motion, council could pass a motion that actually requests that staff consider the suggestions from Chair Phillips and report on that to the September 8th meeting. If there are suggestions that would be substantive, council does have the option at September 8th to, rather than passing second reading, act on that, or instead to pass second reading of the bylaw as presented. So I think the only way that you could ensure that that is considered sufficiently would be tonight to pass a motion directing staff to come back with consideration of whether the proposals from Chair Phillips of the Chamber can be accommodated, or whether they would require substantive amendment of the bylaws.
Thank you.
And of course, if those do create a substantive change, then of course we go back to square one.
Well, if those edits are approved,
Yes, yeah.
And that's what council would have to decide between at that stage, is to give second reading or to instead give first reading to a revised version.
Okay. We have a motion on the table, moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. The second reading is deferred until council's regular meeting, I think is the 8th of September. Right. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council direct staff to look at the recommendations or suggestions made by Chair Phillips from the Chamber of Commerce, and to, in consideration of whether the suggestions are substantive or non-substantive, and to report back to council. Sorry that's so wordy, but I think you have the gist of that.
I'll second that.
Okay. Councillor Bain seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. So staff are going to review these comments, the submissions from the chamber, and will determine in their opinion whether they create a substantive or a non-substantive adjustment to the temporary vending bylaw in anticipation of second reading.
Both of the bylaws,
Pardon me?
just to both of the bylaws.
Yeah, that's right, there's two.
Okay, yeah. All right. Is there anything else that we need to discuss? Hearing nothing? Entertain a
Motion to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
So moved.
Seconder,
Second,
Councillor Carver, all in favor? Motion's carried. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
are there
Good
any
night.
Are there any
questions?
questions
Thank
from
you.
the people at home?
Yes. Nothing coming?
No?
There are no
No,
questions.
no
No
questions.
questions. Okay, we're good to go.
Mm.
Stay tuned. Watch
See you
your
later.
email traffic tomorrow.
Still